So have you ever felt like if you were not the center of attention in a room, if you weren't like leading or talking, that you were then disappearing or you didn't even exist? Like if you weren't holding the stage, being the boldest, or even just the main character, that somehow you were falling behind or you weren't making it? So let me ask you something. What if actually the fastest way to be remembered, to be unforgettable, is not at all to chase the spotlight? Hi, I'm Leezá Steinorf, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're coming back, I'm really glad you're here. On this channel, we talk about clarity and presence, leadership, and what it actually takes to show up and to grow without performing for approval. And today I want to tell you a story, and it's not about ambition, but it's actually about ensemble work. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. And it's about Katherine O'Hara. She recently left the planet, amazing human being, incredible actress and comedian. And I want to share her story because it's super powerful. So when most people think about success in entertainment, they think about the lead role, right? The star, the one you see all over the magazines, the front cover, like the center of everything, right? Who's walking on the red carpet, wearing the clothes, and the endless stories and intrigue about, I don't know, what toothpaste they're using and where they took their kids on vacation. That's what we think about. But Katherine O'Hara built her entire career very differently. So she started in sketch comedy on Second City TV, so SCTV. It was huge in Canada, huge in the United States, went worldwide, and she actually was also a writer. But that is a true ensemble environment, and I'm going to get into what exactly that means. Because when there's an ensemble dynamic, no one person carries the show. Like no one person is dominating. No one gets all the oxygen in the room. No one overshadows. It has to all work together, right? There has to be a synergy and connection so that that whole act works and lands. So here's the first question. Why would someone really talented as she was choose that path? Why not choose the solo spotlight, like the one to stand out and be the big name? And it was a choice for her. And it's because ensemble work actually teaches something that most people never learn, which is why I want to talk about it with you. You don't become visible by overpowering the room. You actually become visible by elevating, by bringing energy and letting everybody rise. And that changes everything. So I'm going to take it slowly for a minute because there's a lot of really high capacity professionals that are quietly missing the point, really, in this whole thing. So a lot of folks, and it's sold to us that way, assume that if we are not driving the moment, if we're not standing in the front of the room, if we are not making our point and everybody's listening to us, that somehow our value is diminished, or that that's the only way actually that we have value. But Katherine O'Hara didn't confuse her visibility with volume. She recognized actually what her strength was. And I'm not talking about her comfort zone. I'm talking about her strength, which she knew intimately. And those are two different things, because comfort zones, like where you're safe and you know how to operate there and it works for you. But strength, when you're honest about it, it really puts you exactly right where your impact can expand and multiply and intensify, even if you're not the one that's center on the stage. Like you bring yourself in such a way that everything starts to sparkle and ignite around you. That's strength. That's really powerful. And in the ensemble comedy, timing matters more than dominance. And she was a master at that. So if you step on someone else's moment, like if it's their turn to shine or step in and you don't give them that chance, then the whole scene dies. It can't live, right? So no one person can hog the stage. So if you overplay your role, all that chemistry just collapses. And if you watch really amazing shows, and I suggest you check out SCTV, you'll see what I mean. And that requires mastery. It's actually very intentional. It requires restraint, knowing when to step in, self-awareness, and confidence that isn't fragile, that you don't need to be in front in order to feel good about yourself. And I'll add something else that I see again and again actually in leadership, and that is working in that kind of ensemble, lifting the entire environment. It requires an internal center that doesn't wobble if the attention goes somewhere else. Like, you don't have to grab it. You can actually celebrate that and underline that and support wherever that spotlight goes. Because when your sense of self is, steady, you don't need to grab airtime and make sure everybody's watching you in order to prove that you belong there at all. Okay? So think about your own career. Just take a moment and think if there are areas, times, meetings with certain people where you're trying to win moments, where you're trying to capture some attention, or you're trying to stand out. And there's nothing wrong if you do. There's no judgment in this. This is an opportunity actually to grow your self-awareness. So see if there are moments like that. And then also check and see if there are times where you're actually strengthening the whole, that you're operating in a way that the entire team, organization, project, whatever it is you're working on, that actually starts to rise and solidify. Because those are two completely different strategies. And literally, I'm going to say only one of them compounds and intensifies over time, like can grow its own dynamic. So if you think about, and maybe you didn't know this, she was the mom, one of the stars in Home Alone, okay? The movie Home Alone, 1 and 2. So on paper, the movie absolutely belongs to Macaulay Culkin, right? I mean, like, he's the center, he's the engine of the whole thing, he's all the chaos going on and charming, and everybody's watching him, right? So where did that leave Katherine O'Hara? She played the mother, but here's the key. She didn't try and compete with the lead at all, right? She anchors the emotions, like she's solid and she's steady. And she actually gives the film its urgency and credibility, and she grounds it with her presence. Because if you think about it, if you watch that film without her performance, the story would just really kind of become chaotic, like not have any cohesion. But with her performance, the film has heart, really. And this is a kind of professional maturity that we almost never name directly. We see it, we notice it, it carries phenomenal performances, but it's rarely named. She understood that the job was not to take more space. The job was to make the story work. So she had a sense of the whole. She was a part of what the whole group was doing. And that is strength. Okay? So here's the next question. What kind of character understands that their role is not to dominate the frame, but actually to stabilize? And that requires ego control. It requires trusting yourself and the craft that you bring. And I want to go back a minute and talk about ego, because it's often understood as this wild card. It lives inside of us. Freud said, oh, the ego and the id and all that. Or we need to try and get rid of it. And not at all. If you consider, just try this on, that the ego is nothing more than the thinking mind. That's all. It's the thinking mind. And you have control of that, right? And you are not your thinking mind. It's a tool. You use it. So is your ego. And that means that you can master it. You can control it. And that's what allows you actually to trust your abilities, and not only what your mind is doing, because you are much more than just your thinking mind. So mastering and being a part of an ensemble requires actually something else. It's something that professionals, as I said, really spoke about as far as professional maturity goes, and that is security within yourself. Because if you're insecure, you'll overreach. You'll try too hard. You'll try and steal moments, or make it bigger, or do more than actually what the story is asking for. But if you're secure, you can actually ask, what does this project need from me? What is being called for here that I can support? And that question, it builds your professional strength, it builds your career, it builds a leader. And I'll say this really straight. In every high-functioning team that I've worked with, corporate, civic, for-profit, non-profit, the people who rise and stay respected are the ones who actually can answer that question cleanly, who know that they have that inner security, and not performatively, honestly. So after Home Alone, Katherine O'Hara, she didn't pivot into chasing lead roles just because she could. She really stayed true to what was important to her. She continued to choose projects where her strength, that collaborative elevation, mattered, where it was actually asked for. And she became known as someone who makes material better, right? Not everybody can do that. And that reputation, that compounds. Remember I said earlier that there's a certain way of being that intensifies and grows over time? It's that. It's being able to elevate the entire experience. And she did it quietly and reliably and over decades. And that's how she grew. That was her success. And here's what most people miss about their own careers. And that is, it's being easy to trust is more powerful than being flashy. That when people know that they can rely on you, they can come to you, that you hold your confidences, that you keep your word, that you carry through, that you always show up. That's huge. Just think of the people that you know. And that has so much more gravitas than being flashy or the one in the spotlight and acting like you know what you're talking about. I mean, that I'm making an extreme here. But even in small ways, when you are the person that's trusted and you show up with your absolute best, man, that carries over decades. So in the film industry, Hollywood, wherever it is, directors want someone who strengthens the entire ecosystem because they're trying to keep that whole story together, right? They can't have just one person going off and trying to show up. It has to all work together. And teams are the same way. They need someone who actually is going to improve the outcomes. And we can also translate that to families, right? So if we go back to films, audience want authenticity. You know yourself. If you see someone who's not really good at what they're doing or they're putting on a show, you can tell they're putting on a show. But then you've seen performances where, man, that is so real, right? That kind of authenticity is strong. And leaders, real leaders, know the difference in how to show up that way or when they're performing. So, literally decades later, when Schitt's Creek arrived, when she also played in, she wasn't trying to be relevant at all. She didn't have to reinvent herself. She was literally stepping into a role that fit who she was, her presence, and what she had been building all along, all over the years. And Myra Rose works because Katherine O'Hara understands that ensemble rhythm. She knows how to show up in connection with the whole. And the work shows because no one's competing for dominance. No one's trying to push the other one out. They're building something together. Yeah, it's more than collaboration. It's really a commitment to the synergy and the energy that results from collaboration. And then suddenly, what looks like an overnight renaissance is revealed as literally decades of that kind of collaborative mastery. So, here's the reveal that most people miss. Ensemble work only works if you know who you are. Like you really know who you are. And I'm going to go so far as to say, and really love who you are. Yeah? Because if you're trying to hide, if you judge yourself, if you don't think you're okay the way you are, and that means with all the bumps and boigles and everything that we have as humans, you know who you are, and you respect and you like yourself, and you show up with your best, that's powerful. And if you don't, you'll disappear. If you're insecure, you'll try and overcompensate, or if you're unclear, you'll resent that spotlight, that it's not yours, that somebody else is standing in it. So the real foundation isn't collaboration. It's not even the ensemble work that comes out of it. The real foundation is your presence. or if you want to say your internal center. And that's where this becomes deeply aligned with everything that we talk about here on this channel, because you cannot contribute powerfully to a group if you are actually competing with it, if you are not comfortable enough in yourself to know that you can be a part of something without having to stand out, right? You can't elevate others if you need their attention to feel valuable. There's a whole different dynamic that's going on in that. And if you think about people that you know that do that, they're always vying to be in the driver's seat or vying for the last word or wanting to be heard over everybody else. You probably recognize they're not the people that are bringing the group together. They're standing out, okay? And there are also people that speak out and have the word in order to bring the group together. It's not that you just stay quiet all the time, but your intention is that galvanizing, okay? So you can't stabilize the room if you yourself are unsure of your footing, let's say, yeah? And so the deeper question then becomes, are you secure enough, you who's listening, are you secure enough to collaborate? Because when you are secure, I'm going to say you don't panic if someone else is shining. You can actually celebrate that and support them. And you also do not measure your value or your worth by how loud you are or by whether you have that spotlight. Because you're not confusing leading and collaboration with control. Okay? And you understand that strengthening that room, strengthening that dynamic, that ensemble, that strengthens you. You are fed by that and you help feed that process. And over time, people notice that. And it's not because you demanded to be seen or insisted that your way got through at all, but actually because your impact that was steady and engaged and trustworthy, that impact cannot be denied. It's like so solid and it's so seen. And Katherine O'Hara's career is a masterclass in something that we rarely ever teach, and that is ambition matured, right? Usually we think of ambition as just like, shooting for the stars and going for it all. But it wasn't suppressed, and she didn't dilute her ambition, but it was refined. It was consolidated. Like she knew what she wanted, and she made decisions according to her values and her intentions. She didn't shrink, but she also didn't dominate. She positioned herself. And positioning, and it doesn't matter what industry is, positioning is literally power, because that's when then you can contribute your mastery. So, if you've been feeling invisible or behind or like you're not making a difference, maybe the question is not, how do you stand out more? Maybe the question is, how do you make the structure stronger? Whatever structure it is that you're working with. And you can ask yourself, who do you want to become in that process? Because here's the irony. When you actually stop fighting to be the main character and you allow your excellence to be felt within that ensemble, you actually become essential, just the opposite of disappearing. You become integral to that group, to that process, and people notice that. Essential people are never overlooked, not for long. They end up being needed and recognized and sought after, really. So, if this resonates, I would love to hear where you see this dynamic in your own life. Put some comments in the chat box. I love to read those. And check in with your work life, your family, maybe your creative process. Like, how's the dynamic working for you? And if you found value in this perspective, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who maybe feels like they're falling behind because they're not dominating the room, or they're not allowing their potential to really show up solidly because they don't know that it's really important to do so. Okay? You do not have to be the loudest person to lead, and you also don't have to be in the middle of the spotlight. You just need to be clear, present and clear. And that's a very different skill. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.